called Love Does. And I have 3 stories I'm going to tell you this morning. The first comes from the book, Love Does. Show of hands, how many of you have been or are reading this book? Okay, so this will be familiar to some of you. For some of you, this story will be new. This is the first of 3 stories I want to tell you. It's chapter 12. It's called Wow, What a Hit. And what I want to talk to you today is about the power of our words. The power of our words. Bob writes, when I was in elementary school, I played Little League baseball. I wasn't much of a sports guy. I suppose I was okay, except for the catching and throwing and hitting aspects of it. Had a uniform, a cap, a glove, and baseball cards in the spokes of my bicycle. So the coach let me on the team and put me out in right field where very little happens. When you're that young, nobody hits the ball to right field. I was bigger than any of the other guys on the team, so everybody assumed I could hit. The fact was, I couldn't. Because I was such a big guy, I almost covered the plate. I wasn't afraid of the ball, and the pitchers weren't very accurate, so part of our team's strategy was to send me to the plate to get beamed by a pitcher 2 each inning. In baseball, when you get hit, you get sent to first base, and you don't even need to swing the bat. I think baseball is the only game where all you need to do is take a ball in the face and you win. So he goes on and he talks about how as a child he just wasn't very good. He was big, but he wasn't good. His team, fortunately though, no thanks to him, made the playoffs. And in the first game of the playoffs, he talked about one of his early at-bats. He had 2 strikes on him, and he decided that he wasn't going to go down without swinging. So he closed his eyes and he swung. And miracle of all miracles, he hit a home run. It was the first hit he had all year. And so as he ran around the bases, he was in kind of shock. He wasn't even sure what to do because he'd never had to do it before. So anyway, he gets back, and the game finishes, and they end up getting crushed. Like, the home run doesn't really help them to win at all. They get beat really badly. A week later, though, he writes about what happens following his home run. A week or so later, I was in my room, and my mom told me I had some mail. Mail? For me? I opened the big envelope, and inside was a card. I think that it was the first card that I'd ever received in the mail, and it was shaped like an apple. I wondered if all cards were shaped like apples. And when I opened the card, the words, "You are the apple of my eye," had been printed by Hallmark inside. In handwriting below were the words, "Wow, what a hit, Bob. You're a real ball player. Love, Coach." I reread the words over and over. Wow, what a hit. I thought, it really wasn't that great a hit. Did he know my eyes were closed? I read it again. Wow, what a hit. I thought about the dozens of times I had struck out or just stepped in front of the ball, hoping my current black eye could heal before I got a new one. Then I read it again. Wow, what a hit. What about all the times I dropped the ball or threw it into the stands by mistake? It didn't matter. Wow, what a hit. I'm a real ball player. I read it out loud to myself. And not only that, I was the apple of his eye. I heard a self-help guy say once you could look in the mirror and give yourself something he called positive affirmations, like saying to yourself, "You're good," or "smart," or "talented." I don't know if that works, to be honest. Maybe it does. But I do know one thing that works every time. It's having somebody else say something good about you. I think that's how we were created, to get named by people this way. I think God speaks something meaningful into our lives, and it fills us up and helps us change the world regardless of ourselves and our shortcomings. His name for us is Beloved. He hopes that we'll believe him like I came to believe what the coach said about me. He hopes we'll start to see ourselves as his beloved rather than think of all the reasons that we're not. It's over 40 years later now, and I've watched a few baseball games, but not many. I don't have reason to think about Little League or elementary school days very often. But when I do, I still think about the card from my coach. And in my mind, I can see myself pulling it out of the envelope. I can see that it's shaped like an apple, and inside the words from a kind man, "You're the apple of my eye. Wow, what a hit, Bob. You're a real ball player. Love, Coach." Words of encouragement are like that. They have their own power. And when they're said by the right people, they can change everything. What I found in following Jesus is that most of the time, when it comes to who says it, we are each the right people. And I've concluded something else, that the words people say to us not only have shelf life, but they have the ability to shape life. Story number one. Story number two happened when I was in Panera this week before I grew gravely ill. I was sitting having lunch, and I was, ironically enough, beginning to think and work on the beginnings of what would be this talk that I'm sharing with you now. And it was lunchtime, and the place was full. But I noticed in front of me, there was a young mom with a daughter. She was maybe 18 months old. And this mom happened to be trying to help feed her daughter and at the same time be on FaceTime with somebody else and eat her own meal. It was kind of chaotic, right? Behind me was a young mom with another small child, but I didn't get a great look at her, but I could hear her, and I'll tell you about her in just a moment. In the first conversation that was happening, and I really wasn't trying to snoop, I really was trying to just eat my lunch and think about what I was going to be sharing. I could overhear her, not so much the FaceTime conversation she was having, but the other conversation she was having with her daughter. And she wasn't happy with her daughter for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure why. You know, I think at 18 months old, you're inevitably going to make messes, right? It's in your job description. So I think her daughter wasn't really playing nicely with her food. It's the best I could get. And so I overheard her kind of half scolding her, saying, if you don't stop it, you're not going to get anything else. I'm telling you, you're not going to get anything else. Meanwhile, she's trying to FaceTime with somebody else, eat her own meal, and scold her child. That's scene number one, okay? Scene number two behind you. Can't see them, don't really know what's going on, but I do know it's a young mom and her child. And what I hear behind me is, you're such a good girl. You're mommy's big girl. I'm so proud of you. I love you so much. You're mommy's good girl. Over and over and over. And I thought to myself, wow, what a distinction between the two homes that those two little girls were going to grow up in. Now, I couldn't help myself, but after both left, I went over and just kind of examined the remains of what was left on the table. And I noticed that one table had way more food and garbage and remains around them. Any guesses as to which table had the most junk? Which one? The one who was loved and spoken kindly to. It was a disaster area. The one who was being harshly spoken to, you could hardly tell that a child had eaten there. And I thought to myself, I wonder what kind of house they're going to grow up in. And it made me think about the kind of house that you and I would want to grow up in. A house of blessing and praise in spite of our messes, right? Because the mom saw clearly the mess, but she called out what was good in the child. But the other mom, who really there wasn't that much of a mess, called out wasn't working right for her. I think she just wanted to have a conversation on FaceTime with somebody, and the 18-month-old was just getting in the way. And because she was too loud or too messy or too whatever, she threatened her with not getting what she needed, which was her lunch. And it just made me think about the kind of homes we grow up in, or the kind of marriages we have, or the kind of schools we go to, and the power of the words that are spoken to us and the impact they can have on our lives. Some people grow up and never really hear blessing. they never really have goodness called out of them. And it shapes them, it forms and even deforms them. And that's a problem. Some of us, a few of us maybe, the minority, are fortunate enough to grow up in a place where the best is called out of us, where we live from a place of blessing. And when that happens, ultimately, we carry a reservoir of blessing where we are able to bless. And that's the power of words. Words can form and shape us, and for good or for ill, they can bring life or they can bring death to us. And that's the second story. The third story I want to talk to you about comes from Luke chapter 6. If you have a Bible and you want to turn there with me. You know, most of the time when we speak words, we don't really, I think about the impact they're going to have. I think we're really, most of us, pretty careless with our words. Good ones and bad ones. I don't think we really weigh them most of the time. And I think what I want to have happen as a result of the time we spend here today is I just want you to realize that you have the power to build up and to bless and to help shape and transform a life with your words. And you have the power to tear down and to destroy and to curse with your words and bring death. You have the power to do that. And so I just want you to be mindful when you're speaking to other people about the power that you hold in your tongue. Now Jesus is going to talk with us, and I'm only going to read a very brief portion of what's called the Sermon on the Plain. It's similar to the Sermon on the Mount. It's Luke's version. It's just a smaller, shorter, more edited version. And one of the things that Jesus is going to talk to us about is not only just the nature of the power of our words, but he's going to talk to us about the source of where those words come from. They come from a reservoir or a treasury. And he wants us to be mindful of that, because that really is what we're going to have to deal with if we're going to speak the kind of words that will be a blessing and not a curse. And so, as he makes his way through some of this teaching, he's prayed overnight, he's called his disciples, and he's making his way down the mountain, and he finds this flat plain in which he begins to teach. And just prior to this discussion that he's going to have about a tree and its fruit is a discussion that he has about not judging other people, not talking about and not making commentary and judgments about who people are and who they're not. And then he says in verse 43 of chapter 6, he says, a good tree can't produce bad fruit, and a bad tree can't produce good fruit. A tree is identified by its fruit. Figs are never gathered from thorn bushes, and grapes are not picked from bramble bushes. A good person produces good things from the treasury of a good heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the treasury of an evil heart. What you say flows from what is in your heart. So the discussion is rather academic when he's talking about fruit, right? So he says, so if you're going to go and look for figs, you won't go and look in bramble bushes. This is not a place like if I'm hungry and I'm looking for figs, I'm never going to go there, right? Where am I going to go? I'm going to go to a place where I know that the source of what I want has its roots sunk deep into a life-giving earth that has been nurtured and that is producing what it is that I'm looking for. I would never go there if I'm looking for figs. I will only go there Very simple, right? Same thing. He says, so if I'm looking for grapes, I'm not going to be looking in thorn bushes or bramble bushes either. That's not a place that I would go to find grapes. Would you go to that place to find grapes? No. I'd go to that place. I'd go to a vineyard. I'd go to a place where I knew that they were watering the vines, where they were cultivating the soil, where they were caring for their end result, the product that they were going to produce. That's where I would go. And this all sounds like elementary, right? Easy. But then he turns the discussion into something more personal. And he talks about how a good person out of the good treasury or reservoir brings out that which is good, but an evil person brings out that which is evil. It just sounds so black and white, doesn't it? Like, I don't know, when I'm thinking about myself, I'm not thinking it's as black and white as like a thorn bush and grapes. Because I'm thinking, well, I've got maybe like some good and some not so good. I'm not great, but I'm not evil, right? So, what is he getting at when he is like subdividing us into a good person and an evil person? Well, here's what I think. If I can use this as an illustration. So, I think we're all full of something, right? The question becomes, what are you full of? Right? So, it's not difficult for me to be kind to you if everything's going my way. Right? Blue sky, right? Things are good, money in the bank, people are kind to me in good relationships, right? If everything is moving in a positive direction, and I'm walking along and you bump into me, probably what's going to come out is goodness, right? Oh, you know, that's okay, right? My mistake, I'm sorry. But let's say I'm stressed. Anybody here stressed? You got stuff going on that you'd rather not? Yeah. So let's say I add a little bit of stress into my life. And it'll start to color my world if I'm not careful. Right? So let's say I'm not feeling well. Let's say I'm frustrated. My kids aren't cleaning up their messes. Right? And before I know it, that reservoir isn't quite filled with complete goodness anymore. And so I'm walking along and you bump into me, and what comes out? What comes out when I'm frustrated or sick or stressed? Jesus says, you will know clearly what's in a person's heart by the things that they say. So you can say, well, I was just having a bad day. No. If you spoke curses to me, if you were negative or critical or sarcastic or you were gossiping about me, that's inside of you. Don't blame it on a bad day. Don't blame it on the fact that things aren't going the way that you want them to. You had to access that. And funny enough, all it took was a little bump. And it came right out. You know, if you can curse somebody in traffic that you don't know, it tells me that you're probably cursing people that you do know. Come on, Pastor. Really, seriously, if you can say bad things about people behind their back, I used to, when I was coaching Little League, and I would hear some of the people, we would have the draft about little kids, and they would break down the kids about what their strengths and weaknesses were. And by the time they got to about the middle end of the draft, it was terrible, some of the things that they would say about the skill sets of the kids. It was awful. And I thought to myself, if you would say this about little kids, 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old, what are you saying about your own kid? And they would sit in rooms and they would talk about other coaches, other families. And I knew that basically they'd be talking about me when I wasn't in the room. Because if you'll talk about people behind their back, no one is safe, right? If I'm critical, if I'm sarcastic, if I'm judgmental towards someone, that means I'm going to be critical, sarcastic, or judgmental towards just about anyone. You see, if I want to know the condition of the human heart, all I have to do is pay attention to what somebody says when they get bumped. And so sometimes what we do is we try to make excuses, like, oh, it's just a bad day. A bad day turns into a bad week, turns into a bad month, turns into a bad life when you start making excuses. What has to happen is we have to see that those who call themselves followers of Christ, who are pursuing goodness in their lives, cannot give room to things in their lives that are evil. What is evil? Evil is speaking poorly of someone else. Evil is speaking judgments of someone else. Evil is being sarcastic and critical and negative and pessimistic. It is. It doesn't build up. Those things only tear down, right? Have you ever spoken a critical, judgmental, negative, pessimistic thought towards somebody else and it built them up and it made them better? And before long, what begins to happen is that river of living water, that excuse we made, that trash that got thrown in that we didn't tend to, it begins to clog up that river of living water inside of us that Jesus spoke to giving us. And eventually it becomes toxic. And none of us want to be that. And yet, when you bump into us, what you're going to get is what already exists in the reservoir. You can only, when you bump into someone, get what exists. Right? Which makes it so critical when we think about the power of our words to make sure that we are tending to the source of our words, which is the wellspring of our life. It's the heart of the essence of who we are. And so if I'm not tending to my heart, if I'm not careful about what I'm allowing in, then what's going to come out is going to curse and not bless. Some of us grow up and we never ever hear kindness and goodness and blessing spoken to us. We've only had pointed out what isn't right, what isn't good, what isn't true. And it causes us to be deformed in such a way that we become like the people who speak that into us. And at some point we just have to call a time out and say, I don't want to be like this anymore. My reservoir may have more than this or less than this, but I have to be honest enough with myself to say, I've got junk inside of me that has to go. It's not funny to be sarcastic and critical. It's really not. Sometimes, especially like growing up as kids, you cut on one another and you say things, you don't really mean it, but you never know when the person you're saying that to is going to take that on board. They're going to walk away and they kind of laugh with you, but then when they're in their own private space, what you said about them caused them to really be broken. And what are they going to do? They're either going to address that and fix that, or they're going to spew that out on somebody else. And then before we know it, we're just all like broken people hurting each other. Because we're like, oh, that's just, we just make excuses for that. There's no real excuse if you're a Christ follower, if you're pursuing goodness. Listen, I know we don't always get it all the time, but let's just not make excuses for when we don't. Let's at least call it what it is. It's pollution. It's allowing evil to enter. And we have to care enough about our souls to not. And so what am I saying? So what are we supposed to do? I think there are things that we can do to care for and nurture our souls, our It's the essence of who we are. I think if you find yourself being stressed out, like just running at a pace that's not healthy, I think you actually can slow down, turn aside, be quiet, and create some space to just breathe and to think and to live. I think if you find your mind being filled with negativity and hatred and judgment and pessimism, I think you can actually go to the scriptures and find some words that actually counterbalance that. It's called the truth of God's word. And as you replace that negativity with things that are good, your mind begins to be the place that as it is changed and transformed, that your life begins to be renewed. I think there's a place for meditation and prayer. I think there's a place for honoring the Sabbath and resting from work. I think there's a place for doing things that we know that will add to the wellness of our lives, our hearts and our souls. I think there's a place for good nutrition. I think there's a place for exercise. I think there's a place for caring for ourselves, such that we will be in a place where we don't allow those things that poison us to then poison others. And so Jesus is saying, if you want to really know what a person's heart is like, listen to what they say. And so what I would like for you to do as we're kind of coming to the end of our time together is I want you just to think about this last week. Okay? Sometimes it's hard to think back beyond that, maybe even a day or two or three. And I want you to begin to examine the conversations you've had, the conversations in your head with yourself, and the conversations with others. And I want you to think about what came out. I want you to think about the way that you talked to your son or your daughter when they weren't doing what you wanted them to do. I want you to think about the way that you talked to your mom or your dad when they weren't doing what you wanted them to do. Your husband or your wife, the people you work with, your friends at school, the people you don't particularly like and don't particularly like you, the clerk at the supermarket, the person who served you when you went to eat a meal. I want you to think about the conversations and the words you spoke. And if you can look at and listen to over the last week or so, you're going to get a temperature or a pulse about the condition of where your heart is. What have you been saying this week? I declare that if you will speak poorly to people you don't know, you will definitely speak poorly to those you do. If you'll make excuses for the reasons why you are, your life will only continue to become more and more toxic. At some point, we need to catch ourselves and say, well, you know, there was no excuse for me to say that to you. I'm so sorry. And then we need to go find a space where we can examine why we would ever have something like that inside of us that we would harbor. Why would we ever harbor the things that we do in our hearts? Out of the overflow of the heart, our mouth speaks. Man, that is powerful, isn't it? So what's in your heart? You'll know very clearly what's in your heart by the way in which you talk to other people. Hebrews 10:24 basically speaks to the fact that we are blessed to be a blessing to others. And so let us think about, let us meditate on, let us ponder how we can motivate one another to love and to good works. What if that's how we woke up and we just thought to ourselves, I wonder today how I could motivate my son, my daughter, my husband to loving good works. Not nag them, not correct them, not call out the bad, but call out the greatness. You are such a good girl, such a big girl. I'm so proud of you. I love you so much. place is a disaster, Marilyn. Right? She's calling out the good. She was thinking of ways to love and motivate. I want you to think about this week. I bet you there's somebody in your world who needs a blessing. How many of you need a blessing? Every one of you need a blessing. So you won't have to think too long and too hard about who in your personal world could really use that. And I want you to think this week about how you might call that out, how you might speak that into their lives. Because, when you speak blessing, you are blessed. It comes back to you. It's how blessing works. It's mutual. And so what if we start to disrupt the flow of negativity by increasing the flow of positivity? Amen. What if we start to disrupt the flow of curses and death by increasing the flow of blessing and life? As we examine our lives, we may well have arrived at the space that we are for a very good reason, right? We may have really had it crash on. People may have really done us wrong. The people who shouldn't have done us wrong, our parents, our siblings, those who were entrusted with our care, they may have done a lousy job. And it may have filled us and deformed us on some level, but at some point, rather than making excuses, we have to come to a place in our lives where we say, I want more than this. I want better than this. I do not want to live a life in which my life looks like this. I have power that God has given me. And that power inside of me can set me free to have a new life, a better life, a clean life, a life in which I give to others not what I got, not what they even deserve or what they need. Yes. We all need blessing. I just want to say to you, there is some place where when you find yourself this next week thinking poorly of someone else, thinking negatively, cutting on them, being sarcastic, being critical, being judgmental, that you just need to look at your heart and say, why would I ever say such a thing? Why would I ever do such a thing? Would I like that spoken back to me? Do I want that to rest in me? I've got to get rid of that. I've got to release that. I've got to open up so that God can fill me with what He wants me to speak into the lives of someone else. Do you realize that the words of a coach to a young child shaped a man who wrote a book, who talked about what it means to love and love deeply and powerfully and personally? That man spoke into this man's life and it changed it. And some of the stories that we're reading and learning from are impacting and shaping others all over this world. A coach, a teacher, a mother, a father, a co-worker, a friend, a student. We have the power to do that. And the only reason we should do that is because that's what love does. Love builds up. It never tears down. So if you want to know the condition of your heart, and some of you may not, but I think we all need to. Because you start somewhere. Right? Wherever it is that you are, that's where you start. I've often found that when I'm in the worst place, it's the easiest. Because, listen, if I've got 100 boxes I've got to get rid of, right? It's just easy. One's right in front of me. Right? So I start with one. I start where I'm at. I start to begin the process of renewing and reviving and cleaning and restoring in the space that I'm at. You want to know the condition of your heart, check out the conversations that you've been in over the last week or so. It'll give you a good indicator of how you are. Don't blame it on a bad day. Don't blame it on being sick. Don't blame it on any other personal issue in your life. Look at it, listen to it, and ask God to begin to give you what He needs to help you guard your heart. It's the wellspring of your life. And it's the reservoir from which your words flow. Let's powerfully build others up. we can do that. Let us think about it. Let us meditate on how we can motivate to love and good deeds. Amen? Amen. Let's pray. Our words are so powerful, God, so we want to look at our hearts and our lives, and we want to see what's there so that you can help us identify and care for what we need to do in order to have a clean and pure heart. That there would be no evil that resides in us, that when bumped, only good would pour out. Only blessings and not curses. Help us to grow from the space that we are, with no shame or condemnation. Just help us to grow and to move forward into the life that you call us. And in advance, we give you thanks for the progress we're making, because we will make progress